بل قد يكون معدودا في الضعفاء. And then he says وفي كتابي البخاري ومسلم جماعة من الضعفاء ذكراهم في المتابعات والشواهد. That in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim you will find a large group of weak narrators. And Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim rahimahumullah narrated from them as mutaba'at. Likewise, Alama Qurani rahmallah said that يدخل في باب المتابعة والشاهد رواية من لا يحتج به بل يكون معدودا في الضعفاء لا أنه لا يصلح كل ضعيف بل الضعيف بما عدا الكذب وفحش الغلط. That means that if you have a narrator who is a little weak, then obviously he can offer support. But if he is extremely weak, then he would not be able to offer any support at all. And we discussed all of this here in detail when we are doing lesson number 45, that the narration of an extremely weak narrator, it does not provide any benefit at all. In al-Bahr al-Ra'iq it comes وهو وإن كان ضعيفا فقد تعددت طرقه والمنقول في الأصول أن الضعيف إذا تعددت طرقه فإنه يصير حسنا إذا كان ضعفه بغير الفسق. That means if it's not extremely weak, it's not because of fisq. But if it is extremely weak, then it does not offer any benefit at all. So the point to note here is that even if the narrator is extremely weak, the narration will still be called a mutabi, or it will still be called shahid. Like we said, that scholars would still use the words of istishhad and taba'a, they will say taba'ahu. But it will not give the ability to offer support and to strengthen. So one is the terminology, the term which is being used. They will still use that same term. And one is the ruling and the outcome, that it will be called mutaba'a, but it won't have, so not all mutaba'a narrations have the same strength. Some mutaba'a narrations could provide strength, and others are just called mutaba'a, but they don't have, they cannot provide any benefit at all. Allama Baqai rahmallah explained this here in a more clearer way in an-Nukat al-Wafiyya. He said, وَأَمَّا الَّذِي يَظْهُرُ مِنْ تَصَرُّفَاتِهِمْ فَعَدَمُ التَّفْرِقَ بَيْنَ الْوَاهِ وَغَيْرِهِ فِي تَسْمِيَةِ مُشَارَكَةِ كُلٍّ مِّنْهُمَا مُتَابَعَةً. That all will be called mutaba'a. So you can have a kadhab, if he has to narrate something, you can even call it a mutaba'a. But it does not call, وَإِنْ كَانَتْ مُتَابَعَةُ الْوَاهِ لَا تُفِيدُ الْمَقْصُودِ مِنَ الْحَدِيثِ. Then here Alama Munawi rahmallah, he quotes the example from Alama Iraqi rahimahullah, that Alama Iraqi, and then it's also quoted in all the commentaries of Muqaddama ibn Salah, that فَمِثَالُ مَا عُدِمَتْ فِيهِ الْمُتَابَعَاتِ مِنْ وَجْهٍ يَثْبُتْ ما رواه الترمذي من طريق حماد بن سلمة عن أيوب عن ابن سيرين عن أبي هريرة رفعه إلى المصطفى أحبب حبيبك هونما. So this narration here, Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah narrated it from Abu Kurayb, who narrated it from Suwaid bin Amr al-Kalbi, from Hamad bin Salama, from Ayyub, from Muhammad bin Sirin, from Abu Huraira, that أحبب حبيبك هونما عسى أن يكون بغيضك يوما ما وأبغض بغيضك هونما عسى أن يكون حبيبك يوما ما. After narrating this, Imam Tirmidhi said, هذا حديث غريب لا نعرفه بهذا الإسناد إلا من هذا الوجه. So he's saying that it's a gharib narration and there's only this, we only know about this sanad. Yet there is another sanad for it. It's narrated via Hassan bin Dinar, who also narrated it from Ibn Sirin. But Hassan bin Dinar is matrukul hadith. He's extremely weak. They say tarakuhu, that scholars would leave out his narrations. So therefore, la yasluhu lil mutaba'at. And then when you're doing Sunan Tirmidhi, the Ustad will explain to you there is a mawquf narration, but it's narrated with the authentic sanad, etc. So whether that mawquf narration could be considered as marfu' and then it offers support. But nevertheless, for here, it suffices as the example. Because after that, Imam Tirmidhi, rahmallah, still commented also on the authenticity of the narration. So, it does not mean that if a narration has a mutaba'ah, then the narration is automatically upgraded and it automatically becomes strong. because you can get extremely weak support for extremely weak narrations. Now, to sum up all of this, what we discussed over mutaba'a and shahid. So basically, with regards to the definitions, before Ibn Salah rahimahullah, the words mutaba'at and shawahid were used interchangeably, they were used very broadly, and they were used very loosely. Then Ibn Salah rahimahullah specified mutaba'at to where the words of the two narrations are the same. And shahid is where the words differ. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah came and he specified mutaba'ah to where the narration is narrated from this, the two narrations are narrated from the same sahabi, and shahid is where the sahaba are different. And then after Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, most scholars then followed his view. So they took the view of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah and they began to say that use the word mutaba'a when the sahabi is the same and shahid when the sahabi is different. Hence, and the new principle which came up was al-mutaba'atu tufidu taqwiyat al-isnad wa shahid yufidu taqwiyat al-matni. That mutaba'a, it provides strength to the sanad. How it provides strength to the sanad? Because now you have support for the same sanad. But ultimately, the matan is still narrated via a singular sahabi, so it doesn't benefit the matan as such. It just provides strength to the sanad. وَالشَّاهِدْ يُفِيرُ تَقْوِيَةَ الْمَتْنِ. So this here is based on the definition of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah. Now, moving on, the author now goes on to discuss something which is directly related to mutaba'at and shawahid, and this here is known as i'tibar. So, i'tibar, firstly looking at the lughwi meaning, the linguistic meaning, in the Quran, so many times it comes, فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَبْصَارِ فَاعْتَبِرُوا يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Commentators of the Quran in the tafasir, they write the meaning of i'tabiru as tafakkaru, itta'izu, an-Naḍar, that ponder, etc. So that's the meaning of i'tibar. So mutaba'at and shawahid dealt with narrators, but i'tibar is the action of a researcher. So you sitting today, if you have to do research, then your action is called i'tibar. It doesn't have anything to do with the narrator. So what's the meaning of i'tibar? It means where you do full research to confirm whether there is support for a chain which was deemed to be solitary. It means you investigate a further narration to confirm whether there is a mutabi' or a shahid. This is the meaning of i'tibar. Doing this action, doing this research to see whether there are additional, whether there is additional support, whether there are additional chains. This here is called i'tibar. So Ibn Hajar rahimahullah explains it as he says, وَاعْلَمْ أن تتبع الطرق من الجوامع والمسانيد والأجزاء لذلك الحديث الذي يظن أنه فرد ليعلم هل له متابع أم لا هو الاعتبار. This is how he explains it. He says that know that researching, so you can see it's the action of researching, it's the action of a person who comes irrespective of which century he comes. Whereas mutaba'at and shawahid was the narrators before books were written. So this he mentions, where do you do your research? Min al-jawami' wal-masanid wal-ajza. When you go through jawami' and masanid and ajza, these are different kinds of books which gathered ahadith. Now, firstly on this portion of the statement where he says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ تَتَبُّعَ الطُّرُقِ. So you can see, obviously we're reading the word tatabbu' with a fatha because of the word anna. But if you go to Nukhbatul Fikr, it's, the words are وَتَتَبُّعُ الطُّرُقِ لِذَلِكَ هُوَ الْإِعْتِبَارِ. So there the word tatabbu' has to have a dhamma. So based on that, Alama Baqa'i rahmallah objected and he said بأن التتبع في المتن مرفوع وفي الشرح منصوب وليس من طريق المزج في شيء. That is not the most ideal way to combine and to integrate the two books. And then even suggests, he say Ibn Hajar rahmallah could have put it in a better way. فكان الأولى أن يقول وتتبع الطرق من المحدث من الجوامع والمسانيد والسنن والأجزاء والتواريخ وغيرها لذلك الحديث الذي يظن أنه فرد ليعلم هل له متابع أو شاهد أو لا هو الاعتبار. He could have mentioned it like that. So he didn't have to alter the i'rab by integrating the two books. Mullah Ali Qari rahmallah responded to this here and said, وَقَدْ ذُكِرَ مِرَارًا أَنَّهُ جَعَلَ الشَّرْحَ مَعَ الْمَتْنِ كِتَابًا وَاحِدًا فَلَا يَرِدُ عَلَيْهِ أَنَّ لَفْظَ تَتَبُّعِ الطُّرُقِ يَنْبَغِي يكون مرفوعا بالمتن ومنصوبا بالشرح. It has been already repeated so many times that he has integrated both books and made it into one book, and it's also both books is his books, so he can do as he pleases. Then he talks about Jawami' Masanid and Ajza. Jami' is that book which includes all the main topics. So scholars have divided essential topics into 8 primary categories: Aqidah, Ahkam, Tafsir, Fitan, Tarikh, Tarikh and Siyar, Manaqib and Mathalib, and Adab. Aqidah, Ahkam, Tafsir. Yeah, so that's how they have divided it. So it's and riqaq. They also have added riqaq. So these are the 8 categories. So it's aqidah, which means the beliefs, ahkam, laws and rulings, tafsir, commentary of the Quran, fitan, traditions and crisis, tarikh and siyar. That's all historical and future events which will take place. Then fitan. And then manaqib and mathalib, adab is your manners, and riqaq is things which soften the heart. So this means basically a jami' is an all-encompassing book. This here is the a common way in which it is used, and there are other definitions too for jawami', because you know when a scholar gave the title of his book jami', and then you see how his methodology in his book, then that will give you the definition of the word jami'. So some of them have used the word jami' because of the order, etc. So that's with regards to jawami'. Then masanid, these are books which gathers and arranges all the different ahadith of the companions of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And ajza, so ajza is the plural of the word juz, and juz is a book which puts together the narrations of a single person or the narrations on a single topic. So you know Imam Bukhari rahmallah wrote, you get juz raf'ul yadayn, etc. So it's on all ahadith on a single topic. So now you know that these kind of books were written by later scholars. It was written only already in the time of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Earlier scholars, they would get narrations with sanad. So here are 2 points we have to take into consideration. Firstly, you look at the definition of mutaba'a and shahid, where Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is recommending how scholars who come after him should use it, because he admits that scholars before him used it in different ways. He even said, "Wal amru fihi sahal." So he admits that scholars would use it in a very they would not confine it before him. So his definition for mutaba'a and shahid is a recommendation for scholars who are coming after. So keeping that point in mind, and then saying that in order to make i'tibar, to search whether there are additional support, we need to go through these kind of books of ahadith. Taking these 2 points into consideration, we can deduce and we can conclude that Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is strong on his view that latter-day scholars can differ with earlier scholars. When you're doing Muqaddamah Ibn Salah, then you remember there's that whole discussion on whether Ibn Salah rahimahullah regards it as permissible for scholars who come later to make tasheeh, etc. We discussed all of that in detail. So here, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is saying that how you make mutaba, how do you find a mutaba and how do you find a shahid, you need to go through these terms. And then he's telling you how to use the term. That means when you are coming after him, how to use the term. So if earlier scholars termed a narration as gharib, then from these 2 points we learn that later scholars don't necessarily have to also pass the same ruling and say that the narration is gharib. Rather, they themselves can go through the jawami' and the masanid and the ajza. And you can see in a statement which we quoted from Alama Baqa'i rahimahullah, he even added other kinds of books. He said, min al-jawami wal masanid was sunan wal ajza wa tawarikh. He's saying that even in the books of tarikh. So you go through all these kind of books, and if you find support for the narration, then you no more have to call it a gharib narration. Now you can call it, if you find one additional change, you can you can say now that it is an aziz narration. If you find many, then you can say it is a mashhur narration. And if you have to look at it also in the chapter of Fard, Ibn Hajar rahmallah quoted Musnad Bazar and Al-Mu'jam al-Awsat. He mentioned that those are good sources for solitary reports for Gharib narrations. Yet, on many of the narrations which they mentioned there, they brought there and they even used the word and said, Tafarrada bihi fulan. You'll find the scholars who came thereafter found additional support and prove that there were additional chains for those narrations. So it was not, those narrations were not gharib. So that's the one point. But then, based on the additional support, the whole ruling of the narration can change. Because Ibn Hajar rahmallah mentioned that the primary reason for mutaba'at is to offer support. Although, like we said, there are other reasons as well. When we're doing now Muqaddamah Ibn Salah, you found that one of the ways of detecting a illa in a narration is through mutaba'at, through gathering all the different turuq and inspecting all the different chains. But if you have an earlier scholar who graded a narration, firstly he said it's gharib, and then based on that he said it's weak. So he is saying it's weak because he thought it was gharib. He's only looking at that one specific chain, and in that one particular chain there is a weak narrator. But then the later scholar can come and he does the research and he can find support, and based on that support maybe there could be either there could be a more authentic, a more reliable narrator, so that the matan of that narration will now no more be weak, or maybe it's narrated with another weak narrator, and putting the two together, the narration can now be upgraded into, it could be upgraded and become Hasan. Like that, narrations could be upgraded from Hasan to Sahih, just because a scholar who comes later finds additional support. So this is what we, and they say read between the lines. Reading between the lines of what Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning here, and deducing from all of this here, and looking that he's saying that you have to go through Jawami Masanid and Al-Jaza, and you look for additional support to see whether there is a mutabia for it. We can see that Ibn Hajar is of this view that later day scholars can differ with earlier scholars. Moving on, he says, وَقَوْلُ ابْنُ الصَّلَاحِ مَعْرِفَةُ الْاعْتِبَارِ وَالْمُتَابَعَاتِ وَالشَّوَاهِدِ قد يوهم أن الاعتبار قسيم لهما وليس كذلك بل هو هيئة التوصل إليهما. So in Muqaddamah Ibn Salah in his kitab Ma'arifa Ulum al-Hadith, that is the correct name of the kitab, Ma'arifa Ulum al-Hadith or Ulum al-Hadith, and it's famously known as Muqaddamah Ibn Salah. He put the heading and he said النوع الخامس عشر معرفة الاعتبار والمتابعات والشواهد. So he's, now we just explained now that i'tibar is the action of the person who is looking. If I have to open books now and start to look, then it's my action. A person in today's time can do the action, whereas mutaba'at and shawahid is the actions of the narrators. But the way Ibn Salah rahmallah put this heading and said ma'rifatul i'tibar wal mutaba'at wal shawahid, it makes it seem as if these three terms are three different categories. But like we just explained now, that i'tibar is not a matching category. Rather, it is the action of learning of the other two categories. So in his Nukat, Ibn Hajar rahmallah commented on this heading of Ibn Salah rahmallah, and he said, هذه العبارة توهم أن الاعتبار قسيم للمتابعة والشاهد. It makes it seem like this here is a parallel category. Like you have now three categories. One category is called mutaba'a, one category is called shawahid, and the other is called i'tibar. He says, وَلَيْسَ كَذَلِكَ بَلِ الْاعْتِبَارُ هُوَ الْهَيْئَةُ الْحَاصِلَةِ فِي الْكَشْفِ عَنِ الْمُتَابَعَةِ وَالشَّاهِدِ. So he's saying that Ibn Salah rahmallah should have actually just put a lam there. He should have said مَعْرِفَةُ الْاعْتِبَارِ لِلْمُتَابَعَةِ وَالشَّاهِدِ. Then that's his heading would have been correct. And in Nukatul Wafiyya it is written that maybe he should have put the word فيه. لو قال الْاعْتِبَارُ فِي الْمُتَابَعَةِ وَالشَّوَاهِدِ أو لأجل المتابعات والشواهد لكان حسنا. If you had to put use the word في المتابعات والشواهد, that you're making i'tibar for the mutaba'at and the shawahid, or لأجل المتابعات والشواهد, so that you can come to know about mutaba'at and shawahid. And then it's explained there again that اعتبار هو تفتيش المحدث على طرق الحديث لأجل معرفة المتابعات والشواهد، لا أنه نوع برأسه كما هو المتبادر من هذه العبارة. So here in اليواقيت والدرر الإمام مناوي also then said فليس الاعتبار قسيما للمتابع والشاهد. Now, although here an interpretation and an explanation could be given for Ibn Salah rahimahullah, and the explanation could be that Ibn Salah rahimahullah is merely mentioning the names of terms which he is going to explain. So his objective is not to explain the different categories and divisions and types. Rather, he's going to now be telling you 3 terms. So he's mentioning the names of those terms. And that is what Allama Baqai rahmallah said, وعبارة ابن الصلاة تدل على أن مراده شرح هذه الألفاظ. That his objective was merely to explain these terms. So if you have to look at it from this angle, then it's correct for him. Then there's no problem for him to say that, or to use all 3 terms in a heading, because he's telling you what is going to be explained. He's not talking about the different categories, etc. So it is from this angle, when you look at it, that Allama Qasim rahmallah said, ما قاله ابن الصلاح صحيح لأن هيئة التوصل إلى الشيء غير الشيء. In Al-Qawl al-Mubtakar on page 71, he says that the way Ibn Salah rahmallah said it, there's no problem. It's sahih. Why? Because there is a difference. So his point is that as long as they are different, it is fine to mention them separately in one sentence. Like if I have to tell you the following sentence, you can see whether it will be incorrect or correct. If I say that, let me tell you about learning and about geography and about science. So if I have to tell you a sentence like that, so learning is different, geography is different, and science is different. So it's 3 different things which I'm going to be telling you about. When I'm telling you about learning, so I'm going to be telling you that this is how you should study, this is the amount of oxygen you should get in your body because it will strengthen your memory to make learning so easy. These are the times you should study, this is how you should study, this is what you must eat, the diet you have to take, this amount of sleep, this is the sleeping times. So it's learning. And when I tell you about geography, I'll explain to you all about geography and the different countries, etc. And when I explain to you about science, I'll explain to you. So the sentence is 100% correct because the 3 things are different. So the atf can accommodate the difference. Now Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, وَجَمِيعُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ أَقْسَامِ الْمَقْبُولِ تحصل فائدة تقسيمه باعتبار مراتبه عند المعارضة والله أعلم. So he's saying that he explained all different kinds of maqbul narrations. He explained sahih li dhati, sahih li ghairi, hasan li dhati, hasan li ghairi, etc. What's the faida of it? He's saying that you will see the benefit of it when you have a contradiction, a seeming apparent contradiction. So by saying that the faida comes at a time of contradiction, it means when you see the narrations contradict each other, then you give preference to that which is stronger. So this is what is understood and derived from this ibara. But this here is not the default ruling. There are a host of other factors which need to be considered. And therefore, Allama Qasim rahmallah, firstly, he quotes the Musannif rahmallah is explaining this here. He says that the Musannif, when he was explaining this portion of it, this ibara, then he said, يعني إذا تعارض حديثان صحيح لذاته وصحيح لغيره أو حسن لذاته وحسن لغيره قدم الذي لذاته على الذي لغيره. Basically, the stronger one gets preference. So Allama Qasim rahmallah said, لم يراعوا في ترجيحاتهم هذا الاعتبار. He's saying that although Ibn Hajar is mentioning this here, but this was not, Fuqaha did not follow this pattern. They would not just give preference to something which was stronger just because it is stronger. For example, and we'll do it when we come to the relevant chapter, but briefly for now, if you have to look in Hanafis, you have 3 different methodologies. If you have to find an apparent contradiction, that how do you give a preference? So the first is, some scholars say that you first look whether there's naskh, one abrogates the other. Then you look at tarjih, whether you can give preference to one over the other. ثم الجمع and ثم تقرير الأصول. So that's the pattern which you will follow. النسخ ثم ترجيح ثم الجمع ثم تقرير الأصول. That's the first group of scholars. The second group of scholars says you will first look at naskh, then you will look at jama', and thereafter you will go to taqrir al-usul. And then the third group of scholars is saying when you find two contradictory reports, then you first go to jama', you try to combine the two, then thumma naskh, thumma tarjih, and then ultimately tawaqquf. You don't even have taqrir al-usul. So you can see there's this whole different methodology. So it's not default that you will just look at the stronger, as long as it falls under the ambit of being a maqbul narration. And from the next paragraph, you will see that Ibn Hajar will also admit to it, that as long as it falls under the ambit of being a maqbul narration, a narration which is hasan can contradict a narration which is sahih. So all this here dealt with the sanad. First, Ibn Hajar rahimahullah discussed the terms for a narration based on the amount of narrators in the chain. So you can see it dealt with the sanad. Then he discussed the different types of narrations in terms of authenticity. And he explained if there is a ruling, if there is contradiction in the chain, the shadh and mahfuz and munkar, etc. And then he explained when there is support for the chain, mutaba'ah. So now he reverts back to discussing the text, the matan of a narration, and he says, ثم المقبول ينقسم أيضا إلى معمول به وغير معمول به لأنه إن سلم من المعارضة أي لم يأتي خبر يضاده فهو المحكم وأمثلته كثيرة. He's saying that accepted narrations could be divided into those which are practiced upon and those which are not practiced upon. But now this here contradicts what he mentioned on page 51. Because if you turn back to page 51, he said, وَفِيهَا الْأَحَادِ الْمَقْبُولِ. And what he said, for maqbul huwa ma yajibu al-amal bihi. He's saying that it's compulsory to practice upon it. So how can he now say that you will have those kind of narrations? So when we're explaining that lesson, then we explain that it's not the case that at all times it is compulsory to practice upon it. We quoted from an-Naḍar, etc. So this statement of Ibn Hajar rahimahullah basically clarifies that statement, that if there is at times it will not be compulsory to practice upon a maqbul narration. And this here is an extremely crucial point for every student of hadith to understand, because in today's times we have the group of brothers who chant the slogan that when you find a hadith, you need to practice upon the hadith. If you have ever traveled in the Khalij area, to Saudi, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, etc., you will find so many. And then it's also now transferred to others as well, that they say that the minute you find a hadith, and the way they make it sound also, that ala ra'si wal ayn, and they quote Ibn Taymiyyah, that kullu ahadin yu'khadhu min qawlihi wa yutrak illa sahib hadha al-qabr, all the different wordings, that you have to practice upon a authentic narration. But there are many authentic narrations which are not practiced upon. Shaykh Awama discusses this in Atharul Hadith Sharif, and he brings different quotations. For example, he brings the quotation of Ibrahim Nakha'i, rahmallah, inni la asma'u al-hadith, fa'anzur ila ma yu'khadhu bihi fa'akhudhu bihi, wa ada'u sa'irahu. Likewise, he brings the sanad, he brings what is sanad to Ibn Abi Layla, that لا يفقه الرجل في الحديث حتى يأخذ منه ويدع. And also Abdul Rahman bin Mahdi. So you can see what stalwarts, what great scholars. لا يجوز أن يكون الرجل إماما حتى يعلم ما يصح وما لا يصح وحتى لا يحتج بكل شيء وحتى يعلم بمخارج العلم. And he also brings of Ibn Wahab, لولا أن الله أنقذني بمالك والليث لذللته. And when people asked him how is that, he said that أكثرت من الحديث فحيرني فكنت أعرض ذلك على مالك والليث فيقولان لي خذ هذا ودع هذا. So this here shows us that there are maqbul narrations which definitely will not be practiced upon. And Ibn Hajar rahmallah will explain which kind of maqbul narrations are not going to be practiced upon. And he's going to show that either there could be a contradiction, if there is a contradiction, or maybe there might not be a contradiction. If there's no contradiction, then it is called muhkam. And he mentions وَأَمْثِلَتُهُ كَثِيرًا. There are many, because this here is the primary way in hadith, that it's the default. A hadith generally all comply with each other, they complement each other, they support each other, even if they seemingly contradict. Either it is because of an absolutely valid reason. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed ahkam gradually, so maybe the one abrogates the other, or maybe at times it is because of our deficient intellect. You know, Ibn Khuzaymah rahmallah mentioned that there are no narrations which contradict each other, and if you find any narration which you feel they contradict each other, then bring them to me and I will show you how they do not have any contradiction. Likewise, Imam Tahawi rahmallah wrote Sharh Mushkilul Athar, etc. So this year he's going to be explaining now that when there seems to be a contradiction, then how to attend to those kind of narrations. So inshallah we'll continue with that in the next lesson. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.